All right, now I'm going to talk about rainbow tables and password attacks. Rainbow tables are tables of hashes and the passwords that they represent. What I mean by this is a hash is an alphanumeric fingerprint of a password or some set of data. But if a person just takes all the dictionary words, like in the dictionary attack, and pre-hashes them and then compares the hash, then they might be able to reverse engineer a password. Now, let's take a look at what a hash looks like so that we can kind of understand that a little bit better. So I'm going to take an MD5 hash generator, and I'm going to put a word in here that somebody could use and might think that it's a secure password. I'm going to put the word PIX firewall. Now, I've taken a compound word here. It's not actually even a word, and something that you would think the hacker probably won't guess. And I'm going to generate what we call an MD5 hash. And here it is. So this is a number that represents that. Now, this is not reversible. There's no key in the world that can take this number and get PIX firewall out of it. Now, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go over here to something called CrackStation, free password hash cracker. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that same number in here and say I am not a robot, and then ask it to crack that and see if it can do it. And sure enough, it came up with the word PIX firewall. Well, how in the world is it doing that? If this is not an encryption, if there's no formula to decrypt it, well, all they're doing is taking dictionary words like we saw back here, just a ton of different possible words, and creating the hash for those words, and then putting those in a big database. And so this is just a lookup in that database. So you notice it says non-salted hashes. That's something that we're not really going to get in deeply here, but sometimes systems will salt hashes. In other words, change them a little bit so that these kinds of attacks won't work very well. But the important thing to understand here is that your system, especially like say a Windows system or even a Linux system, does not store your password as a password. There's no place on your Windows system where you can go and find out what your password is. What it does is stores hashes of the password, and typically salted hashes, which means it alters it in some way so that it makes it harder for this type of attack to take place. So that's it for those. Now I want to take a look at one other type of attack. We just call it a password attack. These are all password attacks: brute force, dictionary, rainbow attacks. But when we just say generic password attack, what we usually mean is that the hacker or the cracker attempts to discover your password just through things like, what are your kids' names? What are your pets' names? What is something that you like in particular? And guessing your password or your PIN based on just educated guesses about you. And that's why we don't ever want to use things like kids' names, birthdays, anniversaries, and that kind of thing as Bible verses, that kind of thing as password attacks. Because there is something that, if it can be identified with something you like, then it's likely that somebody could guess it. That's it for these two, and then we'll take up some of these other types of attacks in the next video.